and welcome to another edition of the Festival Focus. Yes, just 3 weeks away until the start of the greatest show on turf. Sadly, there'll be no incredible Raw in the Cotswolds this year, but still the action on the track promises to be just as special. And boy, we treated to a very informative weekend. And delighted to say that Dan Barber's joined. He's been crunching the numbers, reviewing all the action. We'll get his thoughts on what we saw over an incredible couple of days at the likes of Ascot, Haydock, to Newbury, and over in Ireland as well. And Dan, I think there's only one place that we can start, isn't there? And that is with Goshen putting a grenade into the champion hurdle mark after a devastating success in the Kingwell hurdle. And does redemption await? You and I were both heartbroken after what happened in the Triumph hurdle 11 months ago. But we just saw a sign on Saturday that there may be redemption around the corner. What a story it would be. And he's now in there 4-1, third favourite. No one to know about for the champion hurdle.
Yeah, obviously it reflects great credit on the trainer and the jockey, really, because you wouldn't be surprised if Jamie Moore never wanted to ride again after what happened to him at Cheltenham. But as if this picture didn't look murky enough, that completely blew it wide open, didn't it? We know what Goshen can do. I thought he'd gone. I didn't think the flat performances had been encouraging. I thought it was a case of chance missed because everything was perfect for him. You and I were all over him at Cheltenham, and the race was in the bag, and he was putting up a ridiculous performance, wasn't he? He was absolutely obliterating a pretty good Triumph field that's worked out okay, maybe no better than that, but it was great to see him back. And what was key for me is the fact that all the old qualities that we associate with Goshen appeared to have returned. But he's a hard horse to price up, and I think you can say the same about Honeysuckle. What's she going to do under different conditions? Checking the weather forecast this morning, Matt, Cheltenham isn't forecast any rain for the next 2 weeks. It wouldn't be a million that they were watering in the run up to it. So conditions for her will be different, and she's got to prove it around 2 miles in a championship race away from bad ground. And Epatante, what price should she be? On last year's form, maybe she's a 7-4 chance. On what she did at Kempton, she could be a 7-2 chance. I mean, it's a really tricky race. And there's another horse in there who's not even discussed, who doesn't get discussed often, is Silver Streak, because if you take that Christmas hurdle form literally, he's a potentially massive player each way. And at least you've got a reason for why he might have improved, because they rode him so differently. So it's a really murky picture, but as a purist, it makes it fascinating, even if I don't want to have a bet. And as a huge Goshen fan, I was delighted to see him throw his hat firmly back into the ring.
And let's look at the market. And Honeysuckle is a favourite. As you say, we are not going to know bet on this market, one of the 4 championship races, 5-2. Epatante in there, 3-1. Goshen now 4-1. You mentioned Silver Streak, Honeysuckle, Goshen, Silver Streak. They're the 3 horses coming into this off the back of a victory. All the rest seem to have questions to answer. Goshen, we know, had questions to answer before he come back. You mentioned it's murky. And then Willie Mullins throws her into the hat yesterday. He said about this James de Burley coming over from France.
Yeah, I mean, impossible unless you're all over the French form, which I can't confess to being so. And even if you are, there's always that seed of doubt as to whether they will translate it. How many high-profile French horses have we seen come over here? I was at Warwick the other week. Paul Saga, one of their very best staying hurdlers, the French champion hurdle winner, got lapped by a horse that won a Hereford handicap 2 starts ago. So there's always that danger of whether they will acclimatise. Maybe he's working the house down. And Mullins already has Sharjah as a bit of a marker horse. He was second in the race last season, didn't perform when we saw him at the Dublin Race Festival. But this, on his form of last season, again, he's got each way claims. I just think there are 2 races on that first day that will excite everybody. And I think they're for completely different reasons. Everyone wants to see Energumene, All Mankind, and of course, the big gun Shishkin going at it in that Arkle. But I think people really want to see the champion hurdle, because I think they're lying if they tell you they've got a strong view, because I just don't think you can have one. I think there are too many unknowns, too many possible winners. And when you struggle to price up a race, maybe you might say it's the same for the compilers and they'll make a mistake, but I can't price it up either. So I don't know whether they made a mistake or not.
I won't bother with my next question then, at this stage, what you're fancying. So we'll move on then.
Well, I tell you what, Matt, you can. Because maybe the percentage call at the likely prices is back in Silver Streak each way. Because if the Silver Streak on the balance of his form turns up, then he might finish 3rd or 4th. But, and there is a big but, I suppose, because Epatante clearly wasn't herself, we don't think. But if she was a bit closer to form than everybody else thinks, maybe he's being completely underrated given what he did to her. And as I say, at least you could apply some logic to it. They rode him completely differently. He's normally held up. They rode him from the front. He used his really fluent jumping and speed, and he got right away from her. So there's a chance that he's the one who is being underrated, and he's not a bad each-way vehicle because, as I say, you know that even the general level of his form before Kempton is good enough to see him there or thereabouts anyway.
Let's move on to Ascot. We saw Dashel Drasher come good in the Ascot chase, his third successive course and distance victory. Now he's 14-1 for the Ryanair. He's got to prove he can do it away from Ascot. But he's won 4 of his 6 chases. One of them was on seat, and the other one he was second to chance. So his chase form isn't too bad. He's clearly progressive. But what do you make of him in terms of a potential Ryanair horse?
I think he's still got a bit more of a bridge to cross, to be honest, Matt. There was something of a perfect storm about that Ascot race. I think we've seen all season. I saw a stat: 27% of races over fences at Ascot this season have been won by the horse who made the run-in. And with Surname out of the way, or just after halfway, capitulating with that breathing problem, that's basically what Dashel Drasher did. And it's what he'd done to win his previous 2 starts at the track as well. So he's very effective around Ascot. Those fences come up thick and fast in the back straight before the home straight. And I think they suit those tactics. If you're a brave, bold horse as he is, you can make lengths on those that are trying to make the headway from the back. And we know he's very game. If anything, he was possibly dossing a little bit in the straight. He slowed into the last, and then he picked up again when it looked like Master Tommy Tucker might have a chance of coming claiming him. So it was a big effort, another improved effort, but he's probably run to a figure in the low 160s. And I think to win this Ryanair, particularly with a horse in Allaho I'm particularly sweet on, I think you're going to be needing to run closer to the high 160s. And can he do that away from this comfort zone that he's found at Ascot?
Let's watch him beat for that one. Then also at Ascot, we saw Remastered win the Reynoldstown, a race that's been used as a springboard to the RSL, the Brown Advisory it's called. Now, made all on the Tom Scudamore. We know we just said how much it favours from runners at Ascot. He won't be able to get it all his own way at Cheltenham, but he's 14-1 for both the 3 miler and the National Hunt Chase. Which way would you be edging with him?
Well, this is one of the races I've actually had a playing at so far now, and I'm way down on that. I'd normally be involved in a fair few more markets than I am, but I thought One for the Team was an interesting horse for the National Hunt Chase. Well before, actually, he didn't fire a Doncaster, so I still hold out some hopes for him, but the point I'm getting to is the fact that I think Remastered established himself as maybe the one to beat in that 4 miler, and I think that might be the route to go with him. I really rate the machine. I think he's a seriously good novice who jumps brilliantly for Kerry Lee, but he's had basically every chance to get past him, and Remastered was going away again at the end. To me, he looks all stamina, and that makes me think he should be going down the National Hunt Chase route. You want to call it the 4 miler, don't you? It's the 3 mile 6.
Yeah. The near 4 miler.
Yeah, the near 4 miler. They'll still be legless at the end of it, whatever they do. But yeah, I know the RSA has Brown Advisory, it's known now, has a rep for being a really punishing race. But we've never seen anything like that National Hunt Chase of a couple of seasons ago. That's never happened in an RSA. You're travelling 6 furlongs further. Professional riders this time around instead of amateurs, we guess. So that might change the dynamic slightly. But for me, he just lacks a bit of that top-end quality. I don't see him as a future Gold Cup horse, but you could see him as a future national horse, a Welsh national or a Grand National, because I think stamina is his main attribute. And that's the route I'd be going, Matt. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you don't want to be opening to like some Monkfish. You're basically setting up going on from the front, aren't you? And you might have competition for the lead in the art and the 3 miler as well. So, yeah, he looked about all stamina. He just stuck it out really well. Talking of stamina-laden types, we're going to switch to hurdles, though, and talk about Lisnegard Oscar. Second at Adok, a much better effort. We know he comes to life in the spring. He was a shot winner of the Stayers hurdle last year. But he seems to be back in form, and he's thrown his hat into the ring to retain his crown. Also, Beacon Edge won over in Ireland as well. 16-1 the pair of them for the Stayers, although I know Aintree Hurdle is on the agenda for Beacon Edge, but he's not been ruled out of a tilt for the Stayers as well.
Yeah, Beacon Edge would be one of those people of toy. I mean, I think the festival's big enough as it is in terms of number of days and races, radding mares prizes left, right and centre now. He'd be one for what people have termed the Ryanair hurdle, wouldn't he? Because he looks one for that mid-range trip, a bit like Theatre World of years gone by for O'Brien, who couldn't quite match Histerbrack in those champion hurdles, but was a pretty devastating force when he got to the longer trip at Aintree. And that looks the likely route with him. He looks a real stayer. I think he'd be fine at 3, to be honest. The run behind Honeysuckle and Ronald Pump at the time was treated with some suspicion, and maybe still needs to be, because I don't think he's run to that same level since. But he had a definite excuse in terms of the trip 2 starts ago, and I wasn't surprised to see him just shade that narrow verdict through stamina in hand at the weekend. But yeah, I'd say Aintree would be more likely for him. If the ground isn't soft, would he be sharp enough? I think that would be a bit of a concern with him. So at the moment, I'd side with you there, Matt. I think Aintree looks the most likely and logical route, really, for that horse.
A quick word on Lisnagar Oscar as well.
Yeah, well, it was way better from him, because he's a funny horse, really, because nobody really foresaw him winning the Albert Bartlett. Nobody really foresaw him winning the Stayers Hurdle. It did come out of nowhere, didn't it? His form leading into it wasn't strong enough to think he could. And then he's had a similar campaign this time around, except he's shown more prior to the festival, courtesy of that run on Saturday. The one thing I would know, we've got, 2.5 weeks now, 3 weeks to the Cheltenham Festival, and that was a hard enough race. There was no hiding place. He was the one who was always in the firing line. And I think as much as anything, it wasn't not being in the form to see things through. I just think he wilted slightly late on because they had gone hard. And can he turn around 3 weeks on after a pretty punishing race in background at Haydock? That would be the doubt for me. But yeah, of course, it was a massive step back in the right direction.
Staying with the Stayers, and as you mentioned the Albert Bartlett there, Alaphilippe goes there this year. He's 22 after his win in the trial at Haydock. Just a quick word on him. He was left out in front, but he's got quite a bit of experience, hasn't he?
He does have experience. He's yet to taste defeat, which is something, aside from the Taunton race, where he just came up short against that good horse, Stellar Magic, who for some reason completely flamed out at Warwick next time. I'm not sure what happened there, but I felt that Taunton form had a bit of quality to it, and that's not to suggest for a second I thought Alaphilippe would do that. I mean, of course, the Nichols horse tipping up opened the door slightly, but he's an unexposed horse around this sort of distance. That was his first run at 3 miles, and clearly he's a very thorough stayer who, to that end, is an ideal type for the Albert Bartlett. It's not won by cruisers, is it? It's won by bruisers, really, horses that will continue to plough on, and he looks very much in that mould. Wouldn't put anybody off backing him at 20s.
And just a quick word on Monmorel. He's not entered in the Triumph, I know, but I've got to mention him because he put Nasalem in his place. He was second in a Grade 1. And, I'm not sure it's going to be Aintree or just looking to the future with him, but he's a horse with a big future. We're not looking at Cheltenham, as I say, this year, but he really impressed me the way he quickened up. Yeah,
I'm the same. He's not so much come out of nowhere, but he didn't seem to have the same rep that some do, the likes of Hell Red, who's been disappointing since that Chepstow win, for the same connections. He's been kept softly. And the fact he didn't even hold a Cheltenham entry, I don't know whether that was because they were looking after him or because they didn't think he was of that calibre. But I won't be surprised if they wanted to have a second thought about that now, because I think he's probably the best British juvenile we've seen. We'll discuss the Adonis Hurdle on Saturday. That's often a race that changes the picture slightly. Of course, Tritonic will be top of many people's shortlist for that. He's a very good animal. But yeah, on these shows, I think that's the best performance we've seen by a juvenile so far. Better than Adagio, who didn't give Nasalem as big a beating as Monmorel did at the weekend. So Aintree, he'll be fresh there if that's what they decide to do. Others will have gone to the Triumph and maybe taken the edge off themselves. There won't be as many Irish horses coming over at this stage. We won't have an Aintree market on that race, of course, but you'd have him a fairly short price.
Yeah, well, let's look at Sunday then. The Super Sundays it was dubbed at Newbury, and we'll start with the Supreme. And obviously, before we get onto the big talking points, because we saw Gower Road, despite wandering all over Berkshire, getting up to turn the form around with good ball, and then Soaring Glory impressed with the Betfred Hurdle, which is a decent trial for the Supreme. Things like Kalashnikov, Ballyandy, Get Me Out of Here, winning this and going on to run well in a Supreme. He's 10-1 now. For the curtain raiser, 25-1 Gower Road. Can they serve it up to the Irish though in the curtain raiser?
Well, I think Gower Road will be not slow. That sounds a bit harsh, but probably too much of a stayer, particularly if the ground isn't as tested as it has been. But yeah, Soaring Glory comes right into it. Now you've got to draw comparisons with those others, and one of those, Get Me Out of Here, was trained by John Joe, and he won it off 135, only a couple of pounds higher than Soaring Glory. They've probably going there with not dissimilar form claims. Get Me Out of Here was just touched off by Minora. Remember that? Neither that pair ran as to a higher rating as My Tent or Yours did when he won that. And the same goes for Kalashnikov. He ran to a higher level as well, having just before he was touched off by Somerville Boy. So there's plenty of precedent here. And one thing I would definitely like to stress about the Supreme is it's very rare that you'd have a year where the horses that would have been first and second in the betting aren't there. For me, favourite would have been Fernie Hollow. Second favourite would have been Dusart for Henderson and de Boinville. They're not there now. And I think there's an element of inheriting favouritism as much as anything. I think he's more of a Champagne Fever than a Vautour. I think he's a bit of a grinder as much as anything. And I think he's a potentially vulnerable favourite. And Soaring Glory, if we do think it's a slightly down year for the novices over this trip, as I do, then you're less concerned about the fact he maybe didn't achieve as much as some past winners of the Betfair Hurdle before they went to this. So I think it's a race we can have a crack at. I can totally see the case for him. But what I want to completely throw into the mix there, Matt, is Third Time Lucky for Dan and Harry Skelton. Maybe the County Hurdle will be option A because they've got such a good record in that race. But for me, you can almost throw out what he's done over hurdles so far. He's been beaten in 2 joke races. The Cheltenham race where For Pleasure tore off, and he did way best of the others. And then that race at Musselburgh where you and I could have run faster for the first 1 mile and 3/4. And then they sprinted in the straight. And as they started to sprint, Donald's horse, it was Third Time Lucky who had first crack. And I think he paid for that a bit. And then he belted the last as well. The only time this horse has been in a proper race, and I mean proper in terms of end-to-end gallop, was the Champion Bumper last season. And he did best of those trained in Britain to finish just outside the frame. And there's no Fernie Hollow this time around. And he didn't have a great deal of ground to make up on bare form with that horse anyway. So for me, he's the one who is being wrongly ignored because of those 2 defeats. But he's, as I say, I've not had many anti-post bets so far for Cheltenham. I could count them on one hand. But I think he's next in line for my not significant sums.
Maybe taking Norman and no bet though, because you said they have got the handicap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, let's just move on to the Champion Chase, because we're on the Game Spirit. There's 2 talking points here, of course. We know what the second one's going to be. But just quickly, the claims of Sco Royale, who did it really nicely, quite professional as well. Always looked the winner, didn't he, turning for home. Granatine pulled too hard. Magic State, Fanning Desterel never really got competitive. It was left to Champ to bustle him up. More on him shortly. But can you see Sco Royale improving on his 2019 third place series, 20-1?
I think if you're going to have some sort of bet on what position he might finish in, I think you probably have third about favourite, because he's that sort of horse, isn't he? He's exposed as being below the very best, but he's a very solid and consistent animal that so rarely fails to perform. Now, the thing with this race is, and I think Fanny and D'Estraval's align into that, Grenatine's align into that, a lot of those below the very best are beating each other. Fanny and D'Estraval was made favourite or second favourite to win on Saturday, and that was slightly surprising to me, but I think it just gives an indication that it's a very unclear picture at the minute behind the top level. And I think the thing you're looking at if you're backing So Royale is a potential anti-post angle in terms of the places, Matt. If you're able to bet him 3 places each way, there is a chance that Chacun Pour Soi scares off many at Cheltenham on the Wednesday, and it means that it's reduced to, say, 7 or fewer runners, in which case you're not on a bad bet at all, because you only have 2 places on the day potentially, but you'll have 3 on your anti-post bet. But I do get the feeling that a lot of these horses are competing just for placings, because I don't think he finds loads Chacun Pour Soi, but he doesn't have to. He's so imperious for 95% of the race. 5% doesn't matter because he's already put the race to bed by then. So I won't be looking to get him beaten. And I wouldn't say that So Royale was an obvious alternative to beat him unless he completely blows out.
Yeah, which obviously we saw with Duvan, didn't we, a couple of years ago. Right, then let's talk about the big talking point. It is, of course, Champ, who jumped beautifully for most of the race until it mattered when he clipped the last, or well, bulldozed the last really. But he was going to be outpaced by Scorial anyhow.
Yeah.
But it was a much better jumping performance in the main. 6-1 joint second favourite now for the Gold Cup. How big of a player is he?
Well, yeah, he's a player, and it's all down to price this for me now. How much did we learn at the weekend that we sort of didn't know already that justified the shortening of his price? Of course he was going to shorten because he'd shown he still had a heartbeat. We hadn't seen him. We hadn't seen him since the Cheltenham Festival of last season, where, of course, he snatched the prize in the latter stages from Alaho and Manila Indo. Now, what sort of prep that is for a Gold Cup, I really don't know, because we've seen so few horses try it. I believe Norton's Coyne won at 100s, ran in a handicap over 2 miles the time before and didn't win as his warm-up. So it's not unprecedented, but it's so rare. I sort of feel like it's just not the sort of race in hindsight where we need to be making snap judgments. But probably the bookies did make a snap judgment. They shortened him on the back of that second place, whereas you knew they were going to, as I say, but did he really do enough there in a completely different type of race to the one he'll face at Cheltenham to suggest that he wanted his price going from, was it double figures, right into 6-1 or 9 to 6? So
10s into 6s.
Yeah, I think that's a slight overreaction. I'm not all over the race by any means. I don't think Album Photo's an absolute star, but he gets this Gold Cup prep every single season. And the more you look, the more horses are sort of making themselves unappealing. Santini has stunk the joint out all season, really, hasn't he? And I still hear people saying that he's a potential player back at Cheltenham. If I'm going to have a bet in the Gold Cup at this stage, and it might be at odds with what I've said about the weather so far, it might be a case of doing this and then rain dancing between now and then. But it'd be Native River at 12s, because I'm a big believer that there are Gold Cup horses. We've seen Album Photos one, but horses that are just absolutely tailor-made for the sort of test that they face. And how many try it and don't? Flanders Obo, Silviniaco Conti, two that spring to mind. Even Q Card, brilliant 3-milers who've never quite got the job done over the punishing Gold Cup test. And Native River's been one of very few bright spots for the Tizzards this season, and he could be an even bigger one if the ground's on the soft side at Cheltenham on the Friday.
Just we're going to wrap up at Newbury, and just one else that may have gone under the radar towards a sensational weekend as well. Was in the bumper, Good Risk at All. He had a penalty for a win at Cheltenham earlier on in the year, and then won this really nicely, given a stone to the second. He won his first 2 starts as a bumper and a 4-year-old, and did it really nicely and professionally as well. And with Eileen Dover a bit of a doubt about whether she's going to go, this is probably the best of the British now for the bumper at 16-1, which for me looks like it was a fair price because he's been to Cheltenham and done it. And I say he won under a penalty in what looked a hot little bumper. Yeah,
I think you're right. And I think when I saw the running order for this, and his name was there, I maybe hadn't given him enough credit. I mean, I stuck the rating on that race with time. I went with 116. So if you get to the low to mid 120s, you're banging contention to win a champion bumper. And if you're in the position he is, you're not far off the level required to be placed in one. And I think the interesting thing is, I think he's improving a lot. You think of that debut defeat, Cheltenham was a big step up on that. And then, as you say, giving a stone away to an unbeaten Twiston Davis horse who had got run into a high figure the time before, it's a bona fide, smart bumper performance. And connections, maybe they're the things that are being held against him. Maybe they don't think that Sam Thomas is high profile enough to win a champion bumper, but he's done very little wrong with this horse, and he's had a good season anyway. He's had an improved season. So I think you're right, Matt. I think in the likely absence of Eileen Dover, I think he's got more ability than No Risk at All. I think Sam Thomas's horse is the pick of the British, and I've seen some articles lately, and this was sort of my feeling on the day anyway, that Kilcruit, for all he was very impressive, there was definitely a feeling that race fell apart slightly. I didn't think the second and third were going with any purpose by the end, and he just happened to saunter away from them.
Yeah, it's the bumper Good Risk All worth having a look at that one. But of course, if you're having a bet on the 4 championship races at the festival, you've got the insurance of this. Yes, we are nominal no bet on all the 4 championship races. And of course, we've got this offer as well. 5 places on all the handicaps anti-post as well. So if you want to bet in those big races, entries out this week. We are 5 places on all the anti-post handicaps at the festival. And there'll be plenty of horses going there that are running this weekend as well. That's where we're going to switch our focus now. We're just going to a quick look through the entries for this weekend. We'll start with the Pendle Novices Chase at Kempton Down, where Hitman on the retrieval mission after an unlucky fall at the railway fences at Sandown. And for me, looks the most likely one. He's already beaten GA Law. Mezard Zobo, maybe there to take him on. But it looks like this could be a real nice little confidence boost and a grade 2 success to boot.
Yeah, and I still think he's a lively one, mate. In all the big 2 mile novice prizes, whether it be Cheltenham or whether it be Aintree, he's all quality, really. And I thought he ran really well first time up against, well, obviously he'd won at first class, but when he went and was picked into that graded race behind All Mankind, I thought, considering his lack of experience, he emerged with a lot of credit. And I know it was a long way out, and maybe I would have been proved to be wrong, but I think he'd have won at Sandown. I thought he was absolutely tanking when he fell. And it wasn't, as you say, it was suggesting, it wasn't a blunder. It was a pretty luckless fall. So he's still very high up on my list of the current crop of novices. And yeah, he'll want to be taking this. And I suspect he will go to Aintree anyway. He'll want to be taking this. And what I like about the race is the proper setup, isn't there? There's lots of front runners. Garlaw's in there. He's been known for that. You've got Ansam, who made all, Cool Cody, who made all in the big handicap at Cheltenham earlier in the season. So it could tee up absolutely perfectly for him.
Let's have a look at the Adonis as well, which was identified as the next stop for Tritonic after he won at Ascot. Castle to take him on again, but I was really taken with the way he got there at Ascot and with one going away. He's a real good flat horse. He's like to be taken on by Heris de Soy. You may be fortunate to win at Kempton over Christmas on a Danjoc, however you say it. You sound drunk when you say it. Probably would have beaten him that day. He's back for more as well. Passer Doble gone to Paul Nichols, useful on the flat in Ireland. John Locke for the Skeltons, who's pretty useful for the Chelsea Thoroughbreds on the flat. Interesting to see what does turn up here, but for me, Tritonic sets a rather decent standard.
Yeah, you will not hear a word of dissension from me on that, Matt. I think he's a serious prospect, this horse. And I remember one of the times I wasn't tweeting a bad pun about a race meeting being abandoned was tweeting the McNeil family back in the summertime, maybe when this horse was running on the flat, saying, what price is this fella for the Triumph? Because he just looked a perfect potential dual purpose performer who would make a very smooth transition to hurdling. And I thought he showed so much at Ascot. The runner-up who may well reoppose for Gary Moore nearly got away from him, Coralindo. And I thought he just reflected so well that given how well Gary Moore's horse jumped, forcing the pace, I just thought he reflected very well on Tritonic, that he was able to sustain his gallop from 3 out to the line as he had to do, and he won going away. He'll leave that form well behind. They'll be able to ride him handier. I thought his jumping was largely good. And I hope, of course, the Dovecote is a potentially winnable race as well, but Triumph looks the plan. It would be unusual to see that change of tack unless they were thinking Supreme instead of Triumph. That would have been on the agenda. So I think the Adonis will be where he goes, and I think he'll confirm himself, not exaggerating it, maybe the best British juvenile. In the absence, of course, of Mon Morale, who's going into Aintree.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think he's a huge player. Alan King, of course, has got previous in this division. You talked about the Dovecote, then he is entered there, as is his stablemate, Son of Red. But you got some other nice types in there. Paul Nichols has got 2. Lucky One, who's a runaway winner at Wincanton. The hat-trick-seeking Athol Street, who's 2 wins have come at Taunton. Cape Gentleman, a real eye-catching entry from Ireland as well. And 2 miles around Kempton, I thought would be sharp enough here. But I was really taken with Calico's win at Ludlow. Not too dissimilar Ludlow in Kempton. Travel like the Wrath of God there, this former German winner, German flat horse. And really nice time for the Skeltons, and you'll get a better level of visibility this weekend.
You will, and he'll as you say, I think the key thing is he's whizzed around Ludlow, so he'll probably whiz around Kempton as well. One I'd throw into the mix, no strong views at all at this stage. I was down at Market Raising the day, Quali Smart made not just his hurdling debut, but his racecourse debut over hurdles. In what wasn't a shocking novice hurdle, it was okay. The runner-up has since won a Newbury novice, so that's given it a bit of a boost. And Quali Smart was extremely good. He knew his job. He was ridden like they knew he was a prospect. and he made fairly short work of them. He quickened right away despite a late mistake. I think the ground got to him as much as anything. And of course, the Whittington horses haven't been right. They're still not right, to be honest, Matt. But the price will probably account for that anyway. We'll definitely be getting double figures. We might get 16s, 20s about this horse on Saturday. And a bit like you saying, Ludlow translates to Kempton. I think Market Raisin does as well. It's a similar track, sharpish, right-handed, suits a handy ride, and he'll probably get that. But if he's the horse he looked at Market Raisin, he might surprise a few.
Interesting then. Quality mark then for the Whittingtons. Let's just talk about the big handicap chase, former Racing Post, Racing Plus. So many guys. It's close brothers handicap chase it is now. There was a few interesting Grand National contenders in here. Like the cloth cap have been taken out. I've had a couple of bets in here already. I'll tell you about those shortly. Black Court heads the weights for Paul Nicholls. But yeah, plenty of nice horses in there. Double Shuffle, a regular at the track. Captain Nord, of course, very progressive this year. Another competitive handicap ready to get stuck into.
Yeah, I should be throwing this back to you, though, if you're the one that's already involved. Now, I will do so in a second. Before I just add very quickly that I think Captain Odd might be a slightly vulnerable favourite. He's running really well and his form is strong, but he's sort of getting beaten on merit. I don't think there's much reason to expect he'll improve a lot more. Slate House is still lurking a bit for me, and the stable form is an ongoing issue, but he's potentially overpriced at some of the pick of his form. But I will roll reverse here, Matt, and I'll say big race on Saturday. Where's the Humes cash going?
Well, you mentioned Captain Odd being a vulnerable favourite. He won at Newby, didn't he, early on the season? 4 lengths behind that day was Mallow Ben. He's got a £19 pull with him this weekend. Yeah. And although he's beaten 20, I think it's 28 lengths by him at Kempton early in the season, he tried to make all on that occasion, Mallow Ben. He's much better off at the weights, as I say, this time around. And I think he'll get a lot closer to be involved in the finish. And just a double figure price. And you've got Captain Odd as favourite, and he's got a massive pull in that Newby form. He's won, and Kempton suits front runners. And also at another big price as well. Neil Mulholland's won 2 of the last 4. He's got CP Suits, but he's also got a finger on the switch. He won over Track and Trip. The race that Royal Pagaille won, actually, back in January. He won that 12 months ago and then went on to finish second in the Great Yorkshire. Off this mark, he's going to run off this weekend. Not sure much since, but he's well handicapped. He knows the track. Trainer loves the race. And around about 20 to 1, he was the other one that fancy. So Malaben, finger on the switch, 2 each-way runners for that big handicap at Kempton for me.
Well, you've saved me the work there as well. I won't have to put as much of a shift in the day before I try to pull it. They're great cases, to be fair, and I can totally see the Mellow Ben one. I mean, he's had his brains blown out a couple of times, this horse, going so hard from the front, but he's shown, of course, that he's got more than enough ability, and that turnaround in the weights is absolutely massive.
Well, talking of big handicaps, of course, there's none slower run than the Ida at Newcastle this weekend. All stamina sapping stuff. Up at Gosforth Park, and Sam's Adventures a likely market leader. We know he's got stamina in abundance down his one on heavy ground at Uttoxeter and Haydock in the last 12 months. This is his first try at 4 miles. Won't be an issue for Cross Park, who's won the race, of course, before, and he's been run up in his last 4 starts, but he's got top weight to defy. Callet Mad on here on a comeback after sitting riding the Beecher Chase. He's not been seen very often of late. Big River goes for Lucinda Russ. I can go on and on, but it's not going to be for the faint-hearted, is it, the Ida this weekend?
No, it isn't. And I'm getting the old Gray Nichols, Kookaburra, whichever equipment we used to play with on that cricket pitch. And a straight bat here for me is Cross Park each way. Past winner of the race. I know it's very unoriginal. He's 5s. But you'll get 5 to 4 the place, therefore. I very much struggled to see him out of it. As you say, he won the race in 2019. And he's just running so well this season. He arguably should have won by now. Things haven't gone his way ideally. But he's run a stormer on all 3 starts, which is a far cry, really. I thought he'd become a bit fragile, Matt, and wasn't going to hold his form. But he's held his form really, really well. He's been freshened up a little bit since that latest good effort at Sandown. And for me, it's a pretty thin race, this. I don't think there's many progressive in there. A lot of the Southern stables look like they might be staying at home. And I think Caroline Bailey has probably had this race in mind ever since that final Sandown start, and he'll be tuned to the minute to land a race that he won 2 seasons ago, and he's just absolutely perfect in these sort of races. He's all stamina, and you could actually say the Sandown races haven't got to the bottom of him, and if that's the case, that's not what you often have to say about the Ida, because they will be walking. They tend to walk every year.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't too many 4.25 mile races around, are there? And so they're usually on national trials. But you're hard pressed to see some of these featuring at Aintree. But a couple of horses who we saw at the weekend, we just touch on Lord Dominiel winning the Grand National Trial. The weights are out. He'll be well in under a penalty, or not under penalty. He'll go up in the weights. He'll be well in, you would imagine, by a couple of pounds. And on Tiger Roll as well, returning the Boyne Hurdle. What do you make of his return? He travelled well for most of it, blew up quickly, kind of what you expected, similar to 12 months ago.
Yeah, it was similar to 12 months ago, but after that, 12 months ago, he got completely hammered by Easy's Land in that cross-country race. And it's now 5 starts in a row where he hasn't recaptured his best. And that's 5 starts in a row since that amazing second Grand National success. And bear in mind, he'd won the Boyne en route to winning, a big prize en route to winning the National a couple of years ago. And this time around, he's finished a well-beaten last of those to finish. And I just think it's going to require a huge turnaround. I'd want to see more if he went to Cheltenham in the meantime. He's not one of those horses who... He's quite a good horse to have, I think, as a bookmaker nowadays. I'm sure Freddie's delighted he's in there because he'll be able to probably lay this horse at a much shorter price than he should be because people will be desperate to back him, won't they? They'll see, the public money will see a past dual winner of the race. If he's finished 3rd or 4th at Cheltenham in between, that'll be enough encouragement for a lot to give him another chance. But I think his days at that sort of level are probably numbered now. And the focus, of course, turns to this boring yearly bout of head-to-head between O'Leary and the handicappers as to how they're going to treat him like he deserves special attention. But he needs a high mark for his past exploits, but I think those past exploits are exactly that. I struggle to see. I mean, he's mad enough winning 2 in a row, but then to recapture it as Red Rum did would be something quite incredible again.
Yeah, it's 25-1, and Lord Dominiel as well, 33-1, a gutsy all the way success at Haydock. But we know he can do that. Aintree's a different kettle of fish.
It is a different kettle of fish. Conditions are likely to be far less testing than they were at Haydock. His jumping can be hit and miss. I think that's why he's so well suited to bag ground in some ways. It slows the others down. It means that jumping isn't as significant, perhaps. And he just did what he does when he's on song. He's got a great record at Haydock in the mud. Unfortunately, I don't see that translating to the other Merseyside track if he has a crack at the Aintree Grand National.
Right, let's wrap up then of the National with the weights coming out, as I say, last week. Looking at this weekend then, what will be the one thing that on the Barber plan that you think you're going to get stuck into?
I'm sure this Cross Park each-way vehicle is a very solid bet. It's fairly unimaginative. We've got Tritonic to consider as well, an extremely exciting juvenile hurdler, but I suspect he'll be an even shorter price. So yeah, as I mentioned, it's straight back territory, but I will throw in, apart from Cross Park this weekend as a potential best bet on Saturday, I'm going to throw in and reiterate that 3rd time Lucky View for the Supreme. I won't put anybody off backing him at the sort of price he is, 20s plus, considering how well he ran in the Champion Bumper last season.
Oh, it was an incredible weekend of action we've just witnessed. A little bit different this weekend, but still plenty to look forward to with the festival clues still coming with the likes of the Dovecote, the Adonis and the Pendle to look forward to this weekend. Join us on Friday. We'll be looking ahead to that action at Kempton, Newcastle and the Winter Derby at Lingfield as we continue though our countdown to the greatest show on turf. 3 weeks away for the tape rises for the Supreme Novices Hurdle. The best of luck.